firefighters haven't had to go over to this system yet.
Correct.
That way you're kind of lucky, but you know it's going to happen.
And the radio system is conjoined. I mean, we don't operate on a completely separate system. It's an opensky system that the police are using. The same radio equipment that they're using, we're using Maycom style radios. There are different generations of that, but even at that point in time, even though we're not completely on that system, we are on digital radio system, which has presented a lot of problems for our guys. Making transmissions from out of buildings for help, making transmissions to our chief officers who are on scene trying to coordinate whatever happens at a fire scene or an emergency scene. We have different series. There are 3 different series of radios that we're actually using. Again, some of them are digital, some of them are the VHF series. We operate mainly on that frequency, but the digital radios, similar to what the police are using without the microphones, are still doing all the same things that the police are complaining about doing.
There's an interoperability box somewhere at one of the repeater sites, and it's handling all this nonsense.
Correct.
So, as far as you guys are concerned, I mean, does the fire department want to go to opensky fully?
I don't know that I can speak for the whole fire department. I can only tell you from the research that I've done across the nation with the fire departments. Arizona, portions of Arizona, flat, not the kind of same style construction that we have here, not old buildings, not some of the same stuff, open areas that aren't compromised by trees and different type of landscape. They've gone to a dual system, an analog system and a digital system. They don't use digital on the fire ground. It's too dangerous. To make the transmissions that you need to have at that point in time just don't get done.
Yeah, the everybody get out of the building call may not be heard if it's
may not be heard if it's digital. And New York, again, New York, you can look at, that's one big city. It's very similar to Milwaukee. It has a lot of high-rise building, high compression, amount of people put in a small space, a lot of calls that they go on. They said, we're out. They wrote off over $100 million worth of investment in radio stuff because they said, this isn't going to work for us.
It failed multiple tests milestone tests that they had.
Exactly. And I think that if there were milestone tests for our system here, if you were to look at the check marks, which you've seen with the paperwork that's been given to you, it hasn't performed the way it needs to perform.
Take me through what it's actually like for an officer or a firefighter to be out there and not have his radio work.
To not have your radio work in a hot basement when you have 3 or 4 other guys here, you have fire conditions, smoke conditions, and darkness where you can't see, you wind up having a occupant or someone who you're trying to rescue, who you need to call to get some help, trying to take someone who's unconscious, unresponsive out of a place like that. To not have the ability to call for assistance, to call for help, leaves you as a lone ranger, a cowboy, all on your own. That's a mentality that we don't foster in the fire service. We work on a cohesive thing that our firefighters have each other's back. Our administration and our chiefs cover for us guys to make sure they have our backs. And this radio system has compromised every step of that. Specifically, interoperability. We had a situation, and I said inside with the Pizza Man fire. Yeah. We don't have radio capability to interoperate with the outside communities who would come in and assist us. This is a mandated thing by the federal government for 2013 to be in place, and I can tell you, it probably won't happen. I can't see it happening across the country.
They've spent and spent and spent and spent. They spent $17 million, I think, up front, and they've had to add just recently another $1 million, right?
And we were at that meeting, the firefighters were at that meeting. We raised our concerns then about saying, hey, you've spent above and beyond what was budgeted for this, and will it be $1 million at a time? We sat here and told some of the aldermen that. And I mean, Bob Donovan has been very good. He listens and he's working real hard to try and get us to do that. And it just doesn't seem to make any traction.
This is going to be a significant problem for Tom Barrett. I mean, Tom Barrett is the mayor of this town. He is ultimately one of the people who has his hands in this radio system.
Correct.
He's in a very, very difficult election with Scott Walker. Mark Newman doesn't count. I mean, there's so much ramification to this, not just me. Obviously, the big concern is the firefighters, but also the political ramifications are huge in this. Why wouldn't they just say, hey, we're going to go back to, we still have our UHF gear until we can figure out what the heck is going on here. Let's go back to UHF.
And I don't have the answers to that. But again, I look at the leadership aspect of this. Unfortunately, we just got I shouldn't say unfortunately, that's not right. We just got a brand new chief who unfortunately now has to deal with this. Yeah. It's something maybe he wasn't prepared for, maybe he didn't know was coming, but now in the hot seat he goes. Same way with the mayor. This has been 6 years. He's been mayor longer than that. He's known that this is going on. If you don't keep your hand on the wheel, how will that look for the future?
That's a good point, because everybody who's currently in office, holding an office, was not in office when this happened, right?
Not
this
everyone.
Happened close.
Right.
Was this about 10 years ago they made this purchase?
Right.
Okay,
They initially started on some of that, yeah.
So, but there were many of occasions along the way we could say, look, this isn't working. We got to get out of this system. We got to do something. We don't know what we're going to do.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll have to, hook up with the county and try to help expand out their system a little bit and get on their system.
And the county system that's used by the paramedic units across the county, it's one of the Milwaukee 7 only county-wide initiatives that actually works, is the Milwaukee County Paramedic System. Uses a digital style radio that has a communication base that actually operates and works.
The dispatch consoles, I've been told they're sitting on pallets somewhere.
That I don't know for sure. With the fire department, they've gone through several chief officers who have been our technical service advisors. Currently, they're civilianizing that position, so there may be someone who, because there's, again, maybe now there's no one at the wheel of doing that to say, let's make sure this works. The company that's purchased and bought in, Harris Corporation now, I believe, is the frontline person on this. They said, we're going to do all these things and get all these things done. But the progress, I don't know, has been made there. The same failures are happening, the same radio problems are happening, the same communication gaps exist.
And yeah, so to your knowledge, nothing has changed since the chief said a few months back, I think it was in the winter, he said, we know the problems and we're addressing these problems. So far, nothing has changed since he said that, to your knowledge.
I have personally been on scene as a fire officer, on scene with police officers who cannot make radio transmissions. I've been on scene with them. You're going to have 500 pages worth of seeing that. Yeah. It's still happening today. If those problems, maybe those problems show the greater scope that I believe it had been. I believe this is a lot bigger problem than anyone is willing to admit. With the underlying thing being said, who really doesn't want to say it, maybe this system won't work ever. And then you'll have $20 million that you spent that you'll have nothing for. I would ask what the value of that is. I would ask, is it better to cut it off at 20 million and say this is enough and not spend 40 million? I will say this, as the Wisconsin Emergency Management Group gets together and has some of the radio discussions and things like that, they compare it to Michigan. Michigan spent nearly $100 million to get the entire state in place, and it still isn't in place. $100 million. So we're well going down that road. At some point in time, I think you have to say enough is enough.
And when do you think they're getting close to that now?
I think in the public eye, you'll either see progress now, or you'll see them say, this is never going to work and we got to come up with something different.
You and your firefighters, what's the message you guys want to get out?
We simply want our guys to be safe. Any tax money that's spent needs to be of value. Value is measured by saying our firefighters show up in a timely fashion, give professional service, and fix whatever problem you have, whether it be a fire, a medical emergency, a chemical spill, or anything. That's the value that you get for your tax dollars. The same value for the police department. The value that says I make the call, hey, there's someone breaking into my garage, or hey, my car got stolen, or hey, help, I'm being burglarized, or I'm being held up, or anything. The value that you're willing to pay for is to get them there to help you. The problem with this system is that the value of it being there isn't there. There's no value to this system.
No, it's been an absolute loser since day one. Can you make a mention of something that specifically happened that would be of interest to residents? Oh my God, this actually happened here?
I think that it's hard to narrow down simply one thing, because the failures are repeatedly at their home. When they've called for medical assistance, they've called for firefighters to come and assist them, whatever their crisis is. When we actually get there, our dispatch is working well, to then call for any additional resources that the citizen might need, whether it be an ambulance, whether it be more firefighters for a house fire or something along those lines, a car accident to help to get them out. Sometimes those transmissions don't get through. In our situation specifically, we have not had a firefighter mayday call yet, which is the worst thing that could ever happen, that failed. I have not been on scene of one of those, but I do understand that one of those happened. It's a specific instance of saying this is just not working the way it's supposed to. And
we don't, and that may be the whole lesson learned here right now, is that we don't want that to happen.
Right.
And do they get it?
I think so. I hope so. They've been told several times now, maybe, like I say, pressure from the citizens and pressure from the people who are getting the services that they called for, who are paying this price for this system, will say, I'm not buying something that doesn't work.